What's up, guys? So today, figured I'd do a little mini series. Maybe I'll do a mini series. I don't know. Might do a few videos of like beginner bushcraft. So that's probably what the series would be called, like beginner bushcraft. Probably this will be episode 1. Like I said, I figure on doing probably a few of these. But I figured I'd start off with what I feel like is probably the most important of bushcrafting, and that's knives. So as you can see, I've got a few fixed blades, and so you don't necessarily need a fixed blade when bush crafting, but I feel like a fixed blade is probably a better option as opposed to a folder. Now I've got Swiss Army knives and different folding knives like that, but I like a fixed blade better. It's more robust, and I feel like as far as bushcrafting goes, you've got a better chance of doing good bushcrafting with a fixed blade. As you can see, I've got a few knives here, various different sizes, prices, everything. So I figure as far as bushcrafting goes, I feel like you got to start probably with a knife. So you see all these are fixed blades. You don't necessarily have to have a fixed blade, but I feel like as far as bushcrafting goes, that a fixed blade is going to be better. You'll be able to abuse it a little bit more than potentially that you could with a folding knife. So you can be a little rougher on a fixed blade and not have to worry about breaking your knife as much. But let's get started. So like I said, various different prices, various different sizes. So this right here is Cold Steel SRKC. I've got a video over that if you guys want to check that out. I'll try and remember to leave it up at the top in the iCard, probably on this side, I think. But I've got this one. This is probably the cheapest one of all of them, I think. With this one probably being the most expensive. This is the tops. So I'm going to call this a Bushcraft Knife 2. Alright. It's a little dirty, a little rusted. I've not really packed this one in a while, but you can see just how thick that spine is compared to this one. Alright, so this is the more Cansbull. Also super good knife, but you can see, I mean, the thickness of this is probably 3 times what this is, but the weight is probably 3 times as much too. So like I said, completely different. You've got all kinds of different options. This is very robust, so I mean you could use this as like a little mini machete almost. So you could beat with this, baton with this, and you're not going to have to worry about damaging this blade whatsoever. Now this one I've also beat and strike ferro rods, whatever. So it just depends on like the kind of bushcrafting you're wanting to do. As far as I go, if I was to just be out bushcrafting, this is probably the knife I would pick, just because it's lighter, it's easier to pack on your side. This is kind of heavy. It's got a big bulky sheath, but it's not bad. Maybe if this was on like a backpack, I would probably pack this on a backpack before I would pack it on my side. But I've also got a video over this one if you guys want to check it out. Probably what I'll do is I'll just put like a playlist or something like that, so that way you guys can go check it out. Or I think it's just a knife playlist I've got, so just go check that playlist out on my channel, and you guys can see probably all of these knives. I think except for maybe this one. I'm not sure I've got a video over this one, but I might. This is the Gerber Strong Arm. All right, I believe it's the Strong Arm. I know this one's the Strong Arm, but I don't know. This one's a little bit different. Regardless, they're almost the same knife. The sheaths are a little bit different, but this one is a straight edged. This one, you can see it's got a little bit of serrations on it. All right. Me personally, I don't really like serrations. But as far as bushcrafting and survival kind of goes, I know a lot of people like the serrations just for like cutting cordage and stuff like that. Me personally, I think it gets in the way when you're trying to feather stick and stuff. So that's just another option. You guys can, once you guys get into bushcrafting, you guys can, kind of decide for yourselves what you like better. But like I said, for me personally, like feather sticking and stuff, I feel like you definitely, I don't know, it's not necessarily bad, but the serrations, like I said, just kind of get in the way. So, like I said, the more you guys get into it, the more where you can decide differently. So again, all of these are straight edged except for this strong arm, but it's just kind of, it helps to have more than just one knife. That way you've got options. So the handles on the strong arm feels really good. Like they, for my hand, just fit really snug. They're really grippy. So that's another thing that you want to look for in a bushcraft knife is like grip. So you don't want something that's going to slide out of your hand, especially when it's wet or something, because outdoors you never really know what you're going to get into. Could be wet, could be dry. You just never really know. This SRKC has a really grippy handle as well. So if the handle does get wet, if your hands are wet, if it's wet outside, it just helps to have a grip on your knife, because if the knife slides out, you could potentially cut yourself or whatever. So you want to stay safe. But yeah, so this one also really grippy handle, feels really good. My least favorite handle would definitely be this mountain lion right here, just because of the bulk of it. I don't know, it doesn't necessarily feel bad, but it's just kind of big for my hand. But it's not too bad. Like I said, I mean, if I had this on a backpack or something, I would definitely use this knife, because it's just, I mean, that thing is so thick. Like you're never going to break this probably. I mean, you might potentially, but I feel like it's very highly unlikely that you would break this knife, just because of how thick it is. Some of these other knives, on the other hand, potentially you could break them, but like this one, the Moore's got some flex to it. So, again, like I said, just options, different options of knives, really helps. Another thing that I look for when looking at bushcraft knives is the spine. So for bushcrafting, I like a 90-degree spine. So I don't necessarily like a 90-degree spine on every knife. I've used different skinning knives and stuff, and 90-degree spine is really rough on your thumb, whenever you're trying to process up an animal or whatever. But the 90-degree spine on a bushcraft knife, I feel like, is almost a must. You don't necessarily need it. The first bushcraft knife I ever had was the SOG. Let's see, what was the SOG called? I don't know. I'll try to remember to put it down at the bottom, the SOG knife that it was. But it didn't have a 90-degree spine, which, like I said, wasn't a very big deal. It was just, if you want to strike a ferro rod with the knife, you've got to use the blade. And I don't necessarily like that personally, but you got to do what you got to do sometimes. But a 90-degree spine. So both these Moors have a 90-degree spine. So they will strike a ferro rod. Both my Gerbers will strike a ferro rod. So they've got pretty sharp spines. The SRKC, it's got a sharp spine, and in my video that I made of it, it did strike a ferro rod, but it doesn't throw great sparks. And then the Tops Mountain Lion, again, also, it's got the same spine. I think what it is the coating on both of these knives. Like, they'll both strike ferro rods, but it's just there's other knives that does better. But I'm not saying that either of these knives are bad, but that's just another thing that I look for when looking for a fixed blade for bushcrafting, is the 90-degree spine. Another good thing about a 90-degree spine is you can take a stick and, just like a ferro rod, strike down it, and it creates these real small fibers that takes a really good spark. So especially like from pine or something like that, if you get something something with a lot of resins in it, like pine. Just, make a lot of those really thin fibers and strike the ferro rod. It'll light right up. So that's another thing. Like I said, 90-degree spine. So let's get on to the next reason. All right, so another thing that you can look for when buying a fixed blade or bushcraft knife is the sheath. So with this one, you've got a little spot for your ferro rod, and you've got a little sharpener on it. It's a dangle sheath, which you might like. So, whenever you're walking through the woods, you don't necessarily have to worry about maybe it catching on stuff, because it'll just, hit and bounce off. Whereas with like a fixed sheath, more of like this, if you was to have it on your belt, it doesn't dangle quite as good, so it might catch. So, again, personal preference. The more that you, mess with knives, mess with bushcraft knives and stuff like that, you'll figure out what you like. So this one got a dangle sheath. Now, nothing crazy about it. It's just plastic. The knife fits in. All right, and that's all it does. It just holds the knife. So it's not really that big a deal with this mountain lion. You've got a big sheath with MOLLE attachments. You've got an extra little pouch that you can put extra stuff in. So put it in a little sharpener, put in some tinder. You can, the possibilities are pretty well endless with this. With whatever you want to do with it. Again, with this Gerber, nothing crazy, just a little dangle sheath. It's got spots where you can put it on MOLLE attachment if you decide to do that. If your bushcraft pack has MOLLE attachments, which probably most of the time it will. So yeah, it's just a lot of options, and it's a lot of personal preference. There's no right or wrong knife. That's why I've got so many, and I've got others that aren't out here, but I just grabbed a few because I feel like it's a fairly broad variety between straight edged and serrations, 90-degree spines. There's a lot to kind of take into account, but yeah, definitely some are better than others. They've most of them's got spots for lanyards, so you can. I don't necessarily use lanyards. I don't like them. To me, they don't feel good. But I don't think, for me, it's not a make or break if the knife doesn't have a spot for a lanyard, like this Bushcraft and the mountain lion. Neither of those has a spot for lanyard. But like I said, I don't necessarily think I need one. But again, it's an option. For the most part, they've all got spots for lanyards. Even I think most of the knives that I've got that aren't here have spots for lanyards. So it's just that just the the ability to put a lanyard on if you want to, because you've got, with a lanyard hole, you've got the option to, or not. Without a lanyard hole, obviously you don't have the option. So it's all personal preference for the most part. Like I said, there is no right or wrong bushcraft knife. That's why, again, why I've got so many, because you're always trying to find the knife that you want to pack. But like I said, for the most part, if I had to pick any of these knives, I would probably go with the Garberg, just because I like the feel of it most, and I like the edge, I like the steel. And getting on to the next segment would be steel. So with knives nowadays, you've got all kinds of steels. So this one right here is a carbon steel. All right, so with a carbon steel blade, if you've got a piece of flint, I've watched guys, they'll actually use the spine of their knife to strike a piece of flint if they didn't have a ferro rod or whatever. So it's an option. With this one right here, this one says stainless. I can't really remember what it is. Some kind of Swedish steel or German steel. I think it's about the same as what they would use for a Swiss Army knife, but I'm not for sure. Leave it down in the comment section. Somebody correct me and let me know. With this knife, the Gerber, it doesn't say. I'm sure you could probably find that on their website, but I believe it's some kind of stainless. So stainless is usually harder to sharpen, whereas carbon is typically a little bit softer. It's easier to keep an edge on it. This tops is probably 1095. It also doesn't say, but you know, I think most tops are 1095. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. If this isn't 1095, let me know in the comments down below. But I like 1095 just because it's you know, more of a softer kind of steel typically, not always, but it's just easier to get a grind on, easier to get sharpened. You can, you know, it doesn't hold an edge as good, which is another thing, but you know, your stainlesses, like I said, are usually harder, so they'll hold a better edge, but it's harder to get them sharpened. So what I look at is, you know, if I was in the bush or whatever and was trying to keep my knife sharpened, it would be easier to get an edge back on this than probably, you know, one of those higher end steels, like S35 or, you know, something like that. Something that's hard, you know, it's just harder to get an edge on it. So what I like to do is usually just strop them. You know, I try not to use them to the point where it's too hard to get a edge back on them anyways, but I still will use them to the point where it's kind of hard to get an edge to it. But blade steel is another thing to look at whenever you're thinking about a bushcraft knife. Alrighty guys, so I think that's about it. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys you know, want to see next. Like I said, I plan on making this kind of like a series. This will be episode 1 of Bushcrafting for Beginners. So yeah, like I said, let me know what you guys think. Leave me down some comments down in the comment section. Hit that like button, and yeah, I will see you guys on the next one.